BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, I am so happy. You know why?
Why is that, Brad?
TGIM. Thank God it's Monday. It is Monday, and thank God it's a new month, June 2nd. I'm happy because it's Monday. We're back to working. Everybody's back to doing what they should be doing, except school teachers some of them are already on vacation for the summer.
Oh, Brad, come on. Hey, Francis Howell's still in, Brad.
Yeah, I know a lot. You know, our old alma mater, Hazelwood, the last day of school was, I believe, Wednesday of last week.
I believe you're right.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. That is John Combest. Every single day, he puts together this incredible list of all the important stuff that should be right on top of your knowledge base in your brain. And this morning, especially, Brad has a wish that he hopes granted by John Combest, that a site that has been around for about 5 or 6 years that I have a little bit of things to do with might be in the top 3 this morning. John, might? Can I say might?
Ooh, wow. And Brad, now, I think I know the site you're referring to. How often is that site updated?
Well, about once every 4 years.
Okay, I see. I think we have our answer, Brad. I think whatever topic that is probably going to go in B block.
Oh, God. Okay, there was a good show, John. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Hey, speaking of great things, Arch City Now, the brand new station, KLIS, is now following me on X. And everybody who wants to listen to KLIS can go to luinfo.com. They broadcast their shows live on YouTube.
What did you say?
Right now, there's a show called Arch City Now by Vic Faust, which you can watch live on YouTube from 6 to 8 a.m. on KLIS. If you're listening, that's 5:90 a.m., Brad.
What did you say? Arch City Now?
Yeah, it's called Our City Now.
Our City Now.
Arch City Now is the name of the X account.
What do they do?
What do you mean? What do they do?
I mean, what is that part of the radio station, or is that just something?
Yeah, it's Dave Green has a brand new radio station you're familiar with called KLIS.
Right.
And their Twitter handle, well, I'm not going to give it to you because you'll follow and you'll tweet at them and do embarrassing things. Brad, we do have so many good stories in the top 3 today, though.
Well, we need to move right along, and we bring in this guy, and his name is...
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he does great things like...
We're on our way to the number 1.
And we start with...
In third place...
A story in the Washington Missourian over the weekend by a reporter named Chris Parker. It highlights the legislative session as seen through the eyes of St. Clair State Representative Brad Banderman. I mentioned Friday, Brad, that it's a pretty cool time of year in Missouri political journalism because we've had the big picture summaries of the legislative session, and now we drill down into what each member thinks about what happens during session. Representative Banderman talked a little bit about education bills. You know, he tweaked a little language, he says, that school districts were worried about. You know, they have to have 169 official school days to get a certain level of state funding. And there was language in there that, according to Representative Banderman, was kind of vague about what happens in case of bad weather, inclement weather, et cetera. So Banderman says that he helped clean up that language a little bit. The school districts and DESE seem to be pretty happy with that language. And also, Brad, something that I think you're uniquely suited to talk about. Representative Banderman not only was instrumental in passing that utilities bill for construction works in progress, but Representative Banderman is a big believer in nuclear energy. And according to this Christopher Parker piece, quote, he expressed interest in the simpler and cheaper designs of SMRs, or small modular reactors. Conversations about this energy possibility are taking place nationwide. And Banderman says he wants Missouri in on them too. Here's what Banderman says. I believe that this kind of new, smaller, modular direction that some other states are starting to pick on is the future, starting to pick up on, really is the future of how to produce clean baseload energy. And he says that producing energy in state is the only way to ensure that it remains affordable. So Brad Banderman, a big advocate of nuclear, Brad.
We've talked about, brought that up about the SMRs, the small modular reactors, and essentially some of them are as small as, this is at least, I don't know if they're actually making them like this, but the design would be, they would be able to go like into one of the shipping containers, one of the 40-foot shipping containers, and they would, they would literally put them on the back of one of those trucks that moves the shipping containers around, ship it to wherever they needed it, have a foundation poured, pick the thing up with a crane, drop it in, turn the thing on, and it's producing electricity. And it's sort of an interesting concept. And when the reactor essentially is when the fuel rods are expended and it's time to replace the fuel rods, they just replace the whole thing. They just come, pick it up with a crane, pull it off the foundation, drop another one in there, and away they go. I mean,
that's pretty easy.
It's pretty interesting.
You've been on top of that, Brad. I remember you've talked about this one a few times. So the other thing that's curious about Mr. Parker's piece about Representative Banderman is that at the end of the piece, he talks about the special legislative session. And Brad, as a spoiler, that might be coming up next.
Well, John, one thing about this is Mr. Banderman can think all he wants, but the SMRs will never happen.
Why is that, Brad?
NIMBY.
Oh, you're saying that people they might love nuclear energy, but they don't want it in their backyard.
Right. The concept in this would be you would plunk these things down like in subdivisions and things like that, and it would power the entire subdivision. Or like a small city, like it probably could power, like some of the smaller ones could power the entire city of St. Clair where he's from. But the people are going to go, oh, we don't want that. And the Sierra Club's going to come out and they're going to come out and say that the shell darter that doesn't even live in Missouri will be thrown into extinction because the vibrations from the SMRs will bother the Snell darters and snarters 4 states away, and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
well, you remember, you're a little bit biased too, because we have a friend that used to talk about the Shelley darter. That's what she called her old boyfriends,
That's right.
It was a unique species of man, remember? It would just love to...
And by the way, the reason the SMRs will never take hold is because your buddies, who are the lobbyists for Ameren UE,
that's so funny. I know nobody who's a lobbyist for Ameren.
Will never allow it. They won't never allow it. Matter of fact, to the point where I have it on authority that there is a company that transcribes this broadcast, and every morning they send it to the lobbyists at Ameren, and then they call up John. John, can you rein in your co-host? Can you rein that guy in? You make
I say, look,
bad.
If the Bell Fountain Habilitation Center couldn't rein in Brad Hildebrand, I certainly can't.
Okay, on to number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
It was certainly a non-transparent and obtuse teaser I gave there in number 3, Brad. But the number 2 story today, Representative Brad Banderman mentioned the special session with the Royals and Chiefs. And today, Brad, at 2 p.m., you can listen to This Week in Missouri Politics. Let me correct myself. You can watch This Week in Missouri Politics, TWMPDaily, and hear Governor Mike Kehoe make his pitch with specifics about what is in this Royals and Chiefs stadium plan. Let's get back to the Washington Missourian piece real quick, because Representative Banderman said he hasn't made his mind up on the tax plan yet. So it doesn't seem like he's a hard yes or a hard no on this proposal. But he says, quote, I think you can make a good argument that this isn't public financing. We're not taking money out of the general revenue and giving it to billionaires to help build their stadiums. We're allowing them to keep sales tax revenue that they're already collecting. And Brad, over the weekend, in fact, on Friday, Pete Mundo over in Kansas City had Governor Kehoe on. I had a link up to it on my website on Saturday morning. And Governor Kehoe makes mostly the same argument, which is, look, for the most part, we're taking existing tools for economic development that are already there, that are already being used, and we're maybe enhancing them or tweaking them a little bit to encourage the Royals to stay and to give the Chiefs, the money they need for a new stadium upgrade. So I would expect today at 2 p.m. on TWMP Daily, Kehoe will make much of that same argument about the fact that, look, we're just using, existing tools. And I would imagine, too, Scott does a really good job all the time of saying, but what about people who say X, or what about people who say Y? And I would anticipate that the governor would be able to answer those pretty basic questions about, what exactly this means for taxpayers all around the state of Missouri.
So what is X and what is Y? What are the two questions he's going to ask?
I think he's going to ask for a state that can't afford the projects that were in House Bill 19, that spending bill that died at the end of the session. How do you expect the legislature to approve helping two Kansas City teams when they're not helping a crime lab down in Southeast Missouri, when they're not helping a really important research facility at the University of Missouri Columbia? Why should the legislature help these sports teams when, according to the legislature, they don't have enough money for these really important taxpayer services? I think that's going to be probably the main question from Scott.
John, here we go again. If women ran government, we wouldn't be having special sessions.
Yeah, that's not true.
Today.
But I appreciate your blue pill pedestalization point about this, Brad. And why do you say, remind people who haven't heard you tell the story several times in the last few weeks, why do you say that if women ran government, we wouldn't have this issue?
Because they would give lesser interest to sports because, let's be honest, there are some rabid women sports fans, but and they all have short hair and drive Subarus. They are, and they all think that women's soccer is a real sport. They are far and few between. I see. I repelled off the top of the Kansas City Royals, not the Royals, the Kansas City Chiefs
famously for charity, Brad, not charity. For your own good, for charity.
Salvation Army, yes, for Salvation Army, and
which is where, if you've seen Brad Hildebrand, you know he gets his clothes.
That's right.
And they give him a cup of soup and they pat him and they say, okay, keep moving on. Go over to Goodwill now.
My father always told me, if you don't ever give money to the American Red Cross, give
to the Red Cross, give the Salvation Army, Brad. Army.
As he was on his campaigns in Europe and almost in Japan in World War II, but that's a whole other story. The thing is just, to me, ridiculous. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Royal Stadium. There's nothing wrong with Kansas City Chiefs Stadium. There's nothing wrong with them. It's why I'm going my rant again. Why is it that in the United States we have facilities that are 30 years old and they're in terrible shape, we're going to tear it down, and you go to Europe and you go to places that are hundreds of years old and people go, oh, Europe's so great, they have all this great infrastructure, it's been around for centuries, and we say, if it's 30 years old, it's time to tear it down, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of money in construction. I think there's a lot of people that do want to see new facilities. Brad, you're the kind of guy, I think, that would look at things that are broke down and decrepit and say, I can work with that. Like, look at your cars, look at your radio stations.
John,
but I think a lot of other people look at something and say, hey, we can improve that and we have the means to do it.
John, I read an interesting article over the weekend, we'll talk about in B Block, about some of these centers that are popping up around the country where you can go and get stuff fixed for free. And one of the reasons they do this is?
Why is that?
It keeps stuff out of the landfill.
Yeah, that's true. Like, why throw away an old lawnmower when you can have someone replace it and give it to, someone in need?
Right, like John, he needs a lawnmower.
I bought a new lawnmower.
Did you really? But of course you didn't take my advice, did you?
Which was what?
Buy a commercial lawnmower.
No, of course not.
Okay.
No.
See, John,
I've learned about taking advice from Brad.
John is Mr. Money Man, but yet when it comes to things like that, John, I'm telling you, if you went out and spend like $5,000 or $6,000 for a good commercial walk-behind lawnmower, you would have that for the rest of your life, John. You wouldn't have to replace it every 2 or 3 years like you do the little, the big box push mowers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do know a guy who's really good at Facebook Marketplace. And he told me that he'll drive me to North City. And there's a few black guys that have taken over a property and they don't really own the stuff, but they'll sell it to me for cash. But then they won't help me lift it up into a pickup bed. It sounds like a whole thing, but he doesn't value his time. So he's willing to lose a whole day. So I think I'll spend the day with him.
John, I went over there. I paid him the money. They delivered it within an hour. I didn't waste any of my time at all. Okay, on to number one.
The number one.
Speaking of old men being lost and telling stories, Joe Biden was the subject of Josh Hawley's story on Friday on the Hannity show. And according to Josh Hawley, he had conversations with Secret Service agents. You might recall last year, Brad, some folks tried to make an attempt on President Trump's life. I should say one guy in Pennsylvania that we haven't heard much about. But anyway, Senator Hawley was chatting with a Secret Service agent. And here's the quote from Hannity on Friday. He, being a Secret Service member, told me that Biden used to get lost in his closet in the mornings in the White House. I mean, the guy literally stumbling around in the White House residence couldn't find his way out of his own closet. The president of the United States. I mean, this is outrageous. We were lied to. Senator Hawley on Hannity. Brad, I'm not the least bit surprised that Joe Biden was stumbling around his closet. Are you?
John, I read this story. I didn't actually see the broadcast, but I read the story, and I'm telling you, it just upset me. I mean, now, do you think is Josh Hawley a reliable source? Would you consider to be a reliable source?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's be clear. He's making it clear that a Secret Service agent told him this. I'm assuming Hawley would never say the guy's name. I think Hawley is 100% credible on this for sure.
How sad is this? How sad
it
is
is
this?
sad. It really is.
And do you know who was in town over the weekend, or was it Friday night? Do you know who was in town?
Yeah, it was Saturday night, and it was Rachel Maddow. She was hosted by St. Louis Public Library, correct?
Right. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'm going to ask you a question on this. She's on a book tour. She's promoting some book, correct?
It's a book called Prologue. It's about fascism, yeah?
Right. Okay. And this is a speaker series put on by the St. Louis County Library, correct?
I didn't know it was county library, but I figured if it was a library, it was either city or county. Yeah.
St. Louis County Library. I've gone to Rachel Maddow's site, and for speaking engagements, she gets paid somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. Do you think that St. Louis County taxpayer money went to give her that money so she'd come into town and talk to the people at the pageant?
I don't know. I imagine a lot of it is funded privately or through donors. I don't know the answer to that.
Interesting. Because, I almost said once again, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm trying to curb myself, John. Here we've got a situation where she was one of these people that say the president doesn't know what he's doing. They're terrible. He's a sharp guy. He's like the Morning Joe kind of thing. She's on MSNBC, right? So
yeah, she is.
With
once a week. I think she just does a Monday show now.
Can you believe that? That just cracks me up. I mean, she's getting paid I think it's like $20 million. And one day she says, imagine, John, okay, let's say you were back at Monsanto, back in the good old days, okay? And you walked in to your boss and you said, I don't like coming to work 5 days a week. I'm only going to come to work when. And I'm not even work from home. I'm just only going to work 1 day a week. And it may not be the same day every week. I'll just tell you that, hey, this week I'm going to, but the week before I say, I'm going to work Tuesday next week. What would your boss say to you, John?
Well, it wouldn't be well received. But then again, I didn't have the cachet of a Rachel Maddow. And I think Rachel Maddow has afforded herself the opportunity to just work 1 day a week.
On a cable network, and I've said this before, this is so skewed, there are radio stations in the country. Matter of fact, in the old days, it used to be like a Camo X type station. You still have big stations in New York and LA and things like that.
WHO, one of your favorite shows and stations in Iowa.
I don't think they have the.
Go ahead, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
The size market, but there are radio stations in one city that have more people listening to that station than Rachel Maddow has in the entire country. Now, think about that for a minute. And how in the world do they sell advertising? It's all about cost per thousand. It's all about how many ears, how many eyes are watching or listening, stuff like that.
I would imagine they probably invest some time and resources into getting advertising, and I'm guessing they make it work, or else she wouldn't have that kind of contract, Brad. But to your larger point, yes, Rachel Maddow was in St. Louis, and I don't know how much taxpayer money went for that from the county, but I imagine a lot of that stuff is funded by, it's not a great group, excuse me, like Friends of St. Louis Public Radio, Friends of KWMU, that are, a strong group. The library group's probably not as strong as those folks, but I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of great news over the weekend. KDHX has some great news, not only just the launch of the Lou information station, but great news from KDHX over the weekend.
And by the way, have you driven down Lindbergh to see the new Taj Mahal branch of the St. Louis County Library across the street from
I've
Plastic?
Not. No, I have no occasion to ever be down
back. I mean, once again, libraries. 30, 50, 100 years ago, libraries were important. Who goes to the library anymore? Nobody.
I think a lot of seniors go there. I think, families take kids there to find a wide range of programs and books. I think they still serve a purpose.
That's right. They go there for the drag queen story hours.
Absolutely. Especially during Pride Month.
We got to have those libraries. Okay, we have to take a break.